The rain fell like dirty tears across the industrial colony of Ashport, streaking down rusted metal buildings and pooling in cracked streets that had seen better decades. Declan Rivers adjusted his worn jacket collar against the cold, his boots splashing through puddles that reflected the sickly orange glow of malfunctioning street lamps. This wasn't his first time in Ashport, and he knew it wouldn't be pleasant. The colony sat on the edge of civilized space, a haven for those who preferred their business conducted in shadows. Declan had come searching for salvage, specifically a ship core from a crashed freighter that would fetch enough credits to repair his own vessel. The vagrant star. She was old, temperamental, and leaked atmosphere from at least 3 different hull sections. But she was his home. The salvage yard owner had pointed him toward the industrial district, mentioning something about a marketplace where anything could be found for the right price. Declan should have known better than to follow such advice in a place like Ashport. The marketplace turned out to be a converted warehouse, its interior lit by harsh fluorescent panels that flickered intermittently. Rows of vendors hawked stolen goods, black market tech, and substances that were illegal on every civilized world. Declan moved through the crowds with practiced ease, his hand resting near the plasma pistol hidden beneath his jacket. He had learned long ago that showing weakness in places like this was an invitation for trouble. But then he heard the voices. Not the usual haggling or threats, but something that made his skin crawl. A crowd had gathered near the back of the warehouse, their excitement palpable and disturbing. Declan felt his jaw tighten as he pushed through the onlookers, his instincts screaming that something was very wrong. On a raised platform stood a creature that made Declan's breath catch. She was tiny, barely reaching 4 feet in height, with skin the color of deep violets and lavenders that seemed to shimmer under the harsh lights. Delicate silver markings traced patterns across her arms and face, looking almost like natural circuitry. Her hair, if it could be called that, was a cascade of crystalline strands that caught the light and fractured it into soft rainbows. She wore nothing but torn fabric that barely covered her small frame, and heavy chains bound her wrists and ankles. What struck Declan most were her eyes. They were large, taking up much of her face, and glowed with an inner light the color of distant nebulas. Despite her size and situation, those eyes burned with a fury that could have melted steel. She stood as tall as her small stature allowed, her chin raised in defiance, even as the crowd jeered and shouted bids. The auctioneer, a grotesque man named Groffin, whose belly strained against his stained vest, gestured dramatically at his captive. Behold, gentlemen and ladies, a genuine Lumeni female. Pure bloodline, if my sources are correct. Her people were known for their beauty and their unique abilities. Imagine the possibilities for study, for entertainment, for breeding stock. Declan felt bile rise in his throat. The crowd was eating it up, shouting numbers that made his head spin. Most of the bidders looked like collectors or worse. He recognized a few faces from wanted posters, individuals who dealt in the trafficking of sentient beings across the sector. The small alien girl said nothing, but her glowing eyes swept across the crowd with such hatred that several bidders actually stepped back. 5,000 credits, someone shouted. From the back. 7,000, another. Voice called out. Groffin rubbed his hands together, his smile revealing yellow teeth. Come now, surely such a rare specimen is worth more than that. When was the last time any of you saw a Lumeni? Their homeworld was destroyed years ago. She might be the last of her kind. The last of her kind. Those words echoed in Declan's mind. He thought of his own losses, the family he had left behind on Earth, the life he could never return to. He looked at the small creature on the platform again and saw something in her eyes beyond the anger. He saw loneliness. He saw fear carefully hidden beneath layers of pride. He saw someone who had lost everything. 12,000 credits, Declan heard himself say, his voice cutting through the warehouse like a blade. The crowd turned to stare at him. Grothin's eyes narrowed with suspicion and greed. 12,000? Do I hear 13? The other bidders muttered among themselves, but no one raised the bid. 12,000 was more than most salvage hunters saw in 6 months. It was definitely more than Declan had in his account, but he'd figure that out later. Right now, all that mattered was getting that girl off that platform. Going once, Grothin called out, his gaze fixed on Declan with calculating intensity. Going twice. Sold to the gentleman in the brown jacket. Declan pushed through the crowd to the platform, keenly aware of the hostile stares following him. He climbed the steps and faced Grothin, who held out a grimy datapad. Credits first, then you get your purchase. Half now. Half when I verify she's not diseased or damaged, Declan countered, falling back on negotiation tactics he'd learned in less reputable ports. Grothin's face twisted with annoyance, but he nodded. Fine, but try to run, and my associates will hunt you across 3 sectors. Declan transferred 6,000 credits, watching his savings evaporate with each digit. Grothin handed him a key for the chains and stepped back with a mocking bow. Declan approached the small alien slowly, as one might approach a cornered animal. I'm going to remove these chains, he said quietly, holding up the key where she could see it. Then we're going to walk out of here. Can you do that? For a long moment, she just stared at him with those luminous eyes, searching his face for deception. Then she gave the slightest nod. Declan unlocked the heavy chains, and they fell to the platform with a metallic crash. She stumbled slightly, her legs weak from confinement, and Declan instinctively reached out to steady her. She jerked away from his touch, her small hand going to his wrist with surprising strength. Do not think you own me, human, she hissed, her voice like wind chimes in a storm. It held an accent he couldn't place, musical yet sharp. Wouldn't dream of it, Declan replied, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. But we need to leave, now. She assessed him for another moment, then nodded again. Together, they descended from the platform and made their way through the crowd. Declan could feel dozens of eyes on their backs, could sense the predatory interest of those who might try to steal his purchase. He kept his hand near his weapon and his stride confident. They had nearly reached the warehouse exit when a rough voice called out, Hey, Rivers! Didn't know you were in the flesh trade now. Declan turned to see a bounty hunter named Cross, a man with more scars than sense and a reputation for cruelty. Not in any trade, Cross. Just passing through. With a Lumeni girl? Cross laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Those things are worth a fortune to the right buyers. More than whatever you paid that fat slug. I'm thinking maybe I should relieve you of your burden. The small alien pressed closer to Declan's side, and he could feel her trembling despite her fierce expression. She's not for sale, Declan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous tone. Walk away, Cross. Make me. Declan's hand moved in a blur, his plasma pistol clearing his jacket and firing in one smooth motion. The bolt struck the ground inches from Cross's feet, scorching the concrete and filling the air with the smell of ozone. Next one goes higher. Your choice. Cross's hand hovered over his own weapon, but he must have seen something in Declan's eyes that gave him pause. With a curse, he backed down, disappearing into the crowd. Declan didn't holster his weapon until they were outside in the rain. The small alien looked up at him, confusion and wariness mixing in her expression. Why did you do that? Why did you buy me? Because nobody deserves to be sold like cargo, Declan said simply. He holstered his weapon and started walking toward the docking sector. Come on, my ship's not far. We need to get off this rock before Grothin realizes I'm 6,000 credits short. She hesitated for only a moment before following him into the rain. Her crystalline hair, catching the light from the street lamps, and creating small prisms of color in the dreary night. Neither of them spoke as they navigated the maze of industrial streets. But Declan was acutely aware of her presence beside him. Small and vulnerable, yet radiating an inner strength that demanded respect, the vagrant star sat in a forgotten corner of the docking yards. Her hull scarred and patched, but still spaceworthy. Declan keyed open the airlock and gestured for his small companion to enter. She paused at the threshold, those luminous eyes studying the interior of the ship with obvious trepidation. "It's not much," Declan admitted, "but it's safe. And right now, safe is what we need." She stepped inside, and Declan sealed the airlock behind them. The vagrant star rumbled to life with the reluctant grace of a creature roused from deep sleep. Declan worked the controls with practiced efficiency, his fingers dancing across buttons and switches that had long since lost their labels. The ship groaned and shuddered as her engines built up power, and somewhere in the cargo bay, something metallic clanged loose and rolled across the floor. The small alien girl flinched at every sound, her luminous eyes darting around the cramped cockpit. "Ashport Control. This is Freighter Vagrant Star, requesting departure clearance." Declan spoke into the com, keeping his voice casual despite the tension coiling in his gut. Every second they remained docked was another chance for Grothan to realize he'd been cheated. Another opportunity for Cross, or someone worse, to make a move. Static crackled before a bored voice responded. "Vagrant Star, you're cleared for immediate departure. Bay 7. Try not to hit anything on your way out." "Wouldn't dream of it," Declan muttered, guiding the ship out of the docking cradle. The vagrant star lifted with a whine of overtaxed repulsors, and within minutes they were climbing through Ashport's polluted atmosphere. The colony fell away below them, a spreading stain of lights against the dark, planetary surface. Only when they had cleared the orbital traffic patterns and jumped to faster than light speed did Declan allow himself to breathe. He turned in his pilot's chair to find the small alien standing in the exact spot where he'd left her, looking lost and fragile despite her defiant posture. Now that they were in better light, he could see details he'd missed in the warehouse. The silver markings on her skin weren't tattoos, but seemed to be part of her natural coloration, flowing in patterns that suggested both artistry and purpose. Her crystalline hair moved with a life of its own, responding to emotions or perhaps something else entirely. "You can sit down," Declan offered, gesturing to the co-pilot's chair. "We've got about 6 hours before we reach the next system." She didn't move. "Where are you taking me?" "Away from Ashport," Declan said honestly. "Beyond that, I haven't figured it out yet." "You have anywhere you want to go?" Her expression flickered, something painful crossing her features before the mask of defiance returned. "My home is ash and dust. There is nowhere for me to go." Declan had suspected as much from Grothan's comments about her people being extinct, but hearing her confirm, it made his chest tighten. "I'm sorry. What happened? Why should I tell you anything, human?" She wrapped her thin arms around herself, and Declan noticed for the first time that she was shivering. The ship's climate controls were set for human comfort, which was apparently too cold for her. "You bought me. You own me according to your laws. What does it matter what happened to my world?" "I don't own you," Declan said firmly, standing up from his chair. She tensed, ready to flee or fight, but he moved slowly to a storage locker. "And I don't follow laws that treat people like property. You're free to leave whenever you want. But right now, you look cold and probably haven't eaten in days. So how about we start with fixing those problems?" He pulled out a thermal blanket and one of his spare shirts, both far too large for her tiny frame. He set them on the co-pilot's chair and backed away, giving her space. For a long moment, she just stared at the offerings, as if they might be a trap. Then, moving with sudden decision, she snatched up the blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. The relief on her face was immediate and unmistakable. "Thank you," she said quietly, the words seeming to surprise even her. "You're welcome. What's your name?" Another long pause. "Nixara. I was called Nixara. I'm Declan Rivers." He moved to the small galley area attached to the cockpit, pulling out ration packs and protein bars. "It's not gourmet, but it's edible, mostly." Nixara settled into the co-pilot's chair, the blanket pulled tight around her small body. She accepted the food he offered with obvious hunger, though she examined each item carefully before eating. Declan returned to his own seat and gave her time, occupying himself with checking the ship's systems and plotting their next jump. After she'd eaten, some of the sharp edges seemed to soften. The glow of her eyes dimmed to something less fierce, more weary. "Why did you help me?" she asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. "You spent all your money. You made enemies. For what? I am nothing to you." Declan leaned back in his chair, considering his answer. "About 8 years ago, I was in a bad situation. My transport crashed on a mining colony after we got caught in a solar storm. The company I worked for wrote us off as losses, didn't even send a rescue ship. We would have died if the miners hadn't taken us in, shared their food and medicine, even though they had barely enough for themselves." He looked out at the stars rushing past. "One of them told me that the measure of a person isn't what they do when it's easy or profitable. It's what they do when it costs them something. When I saw you up on that platform, I thought about what kind of person I wanted to be." Nixara was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice carried less hostility. "My people believed something similar. We taught that those with power have a duty to protect those without it. That strength without compassion is merely brutality." Her eyes grew distant. "We tried to live by those ideals. It did not save us. What happened to Luminous?" Declan asked gently. "Raiders came," Nixara said, her voice going flat in the way of someone recounting unbearable pain. "The Korthax Dominion. They wanted our world for its resources, its position near the trade lanes. We were a peaceful people. We had defenses, but we were scholars and artists, not warriors. They gave us one chance to surrender, to become subjects of their empire." Her hands clenched into small fists. "Our council refused. They said we would rather die free than live as slaves. The Dominion honored that wish. They bombarded our world from orbit for 3 days. I watched from the Royal Observatory as the capital burned. My mother, the Empress, she put me in an evacuation pod. I was only 16 cycles old, barely considered an adult by our standards. She told me to run to survive, to remember." Tears began to flow down Nixara's face, luminescent like liquid starlight. "I was the youngest princess, last in line for succession. I was not supposed to matter. But when I woke in the pod, everyone else was gone. All of them. Billions of lives, centuries of culture and knowledge, erased in the span of 3 days." Declan felt his own throat tighten. "How did you end up on Ashport?" "Pirates found my pod drifting near the debris field that had been my home. They sold me to slavers, who sold me to others, who sold me to Grothin. I have been property for 2 years now, passed from owner to owner like a curiosity." She looked at him with those luminous eyes. "Until you—" The weight of her story settled over the cockpit like a heavy blanket. Declan had heard tales of the Luminous massacre, but like most tragedies that happened far from human space, it had been distant and abstract. The Korthax Dominion had been censured by the Galactic Council, paid some fines, and continued on as if nothing had happened. Looking at Nixara now, understanding that she represented the extinction of an entire civilization, made it horrifyingly real. "I'm sorry," Declan said, knowing the words were inadequate. "I'm sorry that happened to you and your people. Sorry does not bring them back, Nixara replied, but her tone held no accusation. Nothing brings them back. They sat in silence for a while, the hum of the ship's engines filling the space between them. Eventually, Declan stood and gestured toward the back of the ship. Come on, let me show you around. If you're going to be here for a bit, you should know where everything is. The vagrant star was not large. Besides the cockpit, there was a small common area with a table and seating, a cramped galley, a refresher unit that worked when it felt like it, 2 sleeping quarters that were barely bigger than closets, and a cargo bay that currently held a collection of salvaged parts and equipment. Declan showed Nixara everything, explaining the quirks and failures of each system with the affection of someone describing a beloved but troublesome pet. The refresher sometimes sprays cold water for no reason, he explained, demonstrating the controls. And the sleeping quarters on the right has a bunk that folds up if you're not careful. But everything works well enough to keep us alive. Nixara explored each space with obvious curiosity, her small hands trailing over surfaces and controls. In the cargo bay, she paused before a collection of items Declan had arranged on a shelf. Books, both physical and data chips. A carved wooden figure he'd traded for on Epsilon Prime. A handful of colorful stones from various worlds. Small treasures that cost little, but meant something. You collect memories, Nixara observed. Something like that, Declan agreed. When you spend most of your time drifting between stars, it helps to have reminders that you've actually been places, done things. She picked up one of the stones, a piece of amber with an insect preserved inside. On Luminous, we kept memory gardens. Each family would plant flowers and trees to commemorate important events, people we loved, moments we wanted to preserve. My mother's garden had 7,000 plants, one for each year of her reign. She set the amber down carefully. I suppose this is similar. A different way of keeping the past alive. You could add something if you wanted, Declan offered. To remember your home. Nixara looked at him with surprise and reached up to her crystalline hair. With a careful motion, she pulled free a single strand. It came away with a soft chime, like breaking glass, and continued to glow with inner light even detached from her. In our culture, we gave strands of our hair to mark significant moments or bonds. I have not given one freely since the fall. She held it out to him. For showing me kindness when you had no reason to do so. Declan accepted the gift with reverence, understanding its significance. The strand was warm in his palm and seemed to pulse with a gentle rhythm. I'll keep it safe, he promised. Thank you, Nixara. She nodded, and for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled. It was a small expression, tentative and fragile, but it transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. Perhaps you are different from other humans I have known, Declan Rivers. Perhaps there is hope in this galaxy after all. Before either of them could say more, the ship's proximity alarm began to wail. Declan lunged for the cockpit. Nixara closed behind him, despite her unfamiliarity with the ship. The console displayed 3 rapidly approaching signatures, their transponder codes marking them as independent vessels, which in this sector meant only one thing. Pirates, bounty hunters, or worse. Strap in, Declan ordered, throwing himself into the pilot's seat and killing the alarm. His hands moved across the controls with practiced speed, bringing up defensive systems that were more hope than actual protection. The vagrant star had shields, but they were designed to deflect micrometeors and radiation, not weapons fire. Nixara secured herself in the co-pilot's chair, her eyes wide as she watched the display. Who are they? Nothing good, Declan muttered. The cum crackled to life before he could say more. Vagrant star, this is the hunter vessel Crimson Talon. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. We are here for the Lumeni. Surrender her, and you can go free. Declan's jaw clenched. Word had traveled fast. Someone from Ashport must have put out a bounty, probably Groffin, once he realized he'd been cheated, or maybe one of the other bidders who wanted what they'd lost. He glanced at Nixara, seeing fear break through her defiant mask for the first time. Not happening, Declan said, more to her than to the ships pursuing them. He opened the com channel. Crimson Talon, I don't know what you've heard, but there's no Lumeni on this ship. You've got bad information. We tracked you from Ashport, Rivers. We know what you bought. Make this easy on yourself. Declan cut the channel and redirected power from life support to the engines. The ship lurched forward, accelerating hard enough to press them back into their seats. Hold on. This is going to get rough. The 3 hunter ships matched his speed easily, their superior engines closing the distance. Red targeting indicators appeared on Declan's display as they achieved weapons lock. He threw the Vagrant Star into a spiral, the old ship groaning in protest as she was pushed beyond her design specifications. The first volley of weapons fire streaked past them, close enough that the shields flared and sparked. There, Nixara said suddenly, pointing at the display. That asteroid field. Can we hide there? Declan looked where she indicated and saw the tumbling rocks of a dense field ahead, the remnants of some long-destroyed moon. It was dangerous, potentially fatal for a ship as sluggish as the Vagrant Star, but staying in open space was certain death. Good eye, he said, angling toward the field. The hunter ships followed, their voices crackling over the com with threats and promises of what they'd do once they caught him. Declan ignored them, all his focus on navigating between massive chunks of rock that could shatter his ship with a single collision. Warning klaxons blared as proximity sensors screamed about incoming impacts. He juked left, rolled right, dove under a spinning boulder the size of a small building. Nixara gripped her armrests but said nothing, her trust in his abilities complete. That trust gave Declan strength as he pushed the Vagrant Star through maneuvers that should have torn her apart. Behind them, one of the hunter ships wasn't as skilled or lucky. It clipped an asteroid and went spinning out of control, disappearing in a brief flash of exploding fuel. 2 left, Declan muttered, weaving through a particularly dense cluster. His console lit up with damage warnings. Hull breaches in sections 4 and 7. Shield generator operating at 30%. Engine temperature climbing into the red. The ship couldn't take much more dot, and Nixara did something unexpected. She reached out and placed her small hand on the console, and her silver markings began to glow brighter. The light spread from her fingers into the ship's systems, and suddenly the controls responded faster, smoother. The engine temperature dropped, and the shield strengthened. What are you doing? Declan asked, amazed. My people had an affinity for technology, Nixara explained, her voice strained with concentration. We could interface with machines, encourage them to perform beyond their limits. I have not done this since before the fall, but your ship is kind. She wants to protect us. Retry you be. The Vagrant Star seemed to purr under Nixara's touch, and Declan took advantage of the improved performance to execute a tight loop around a massive asteroid. The maneuver brought them behind one of the pursuing ships, and Declan didn't hesitate. He fired the Vagrant Star's single plasma cannon, a weapon he'd salvaged months ago and barely knew how to use. The shot went wide, but close enough to make the hunter ship veer away, directly into the path of a tumbling rock. The collision wasn't fatal, but it knocked them out of pursuit. The last hunter ship broke off, apparently deciding the bounty wasn't worth the risk. Declan guided the Vagrant Star out of the asteroid field and into the relative safety of open space. Only when they were clear, and he'd confirmed no other ships were following, did he slump back in his seat. Adrenaline leaving him shaky, Nixara removed her hand from the console, and the glow of her markings faded to their normal luminescence. She looked exhausted, her small frame trembling. I may have overextended myself, she admitted quietly. You saved us, Declan said firmly. Rest now. I'll handle things from here. But Nyxara shook her head, though she did curl up in the chair, pulling the thermal blanket around herself. They will not stop coming. As long as I exist, there will be those who want to capture me, study me, or worse. You cannot protect me forever, Declan Rivers. Perhaps it would be better if you left me at the next station. I will find my own way. Absolutely not, Declan said, the vehemence in his voice surprising them both. We'll figure something out. There has to be somewhere safe, somewhere off the major routes where people won't ask too many questions. He thought for a moment, then remembered something. Years ago, he'd met a man named Captain Joseph Brandt, a retired military officer who'd established a settlement on a frontier world called Haven's Rest. It was a place where different species coexisted peacefully, far from the corruption and cruelty of places like Ashport. Joseph had told Declan he'd always be welcome if he needed sanctuary. I know a place, Declan said, plotting a new course. It's about 3 days from here, but it should be safe. A friend of mine runs a settlement where they don't care about bounties or what species you are. We can lay low there, figure out our next move. Nyxara studied him with those luminous eyes. Why do you keep helping me? You have fulfilled any obligation you might have felt. You freed me from that auction. You could leave me anywhere and consider your conscience clear. Declan turned to face her fully and found himself speaking a truth he hadn't fully acknowledged until that moment. Because in the short time I've known you, you've shown more courage and grace than most people manage in a lifetime. Because you deserve better than what this galaxy has given you. And because I like having you around. Your company, I mean. It's nice not traveling alone for once. A blush of deeper violet spread across Nyxara's cheeks, and she looked away, but not before he saw her smile again. You are strange, Declan Rivers. But perhaps that is not such a bad thing. The 3 days of travel passed in a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Declan taught Nyxara about the ship's systems, and she shared stories of her homeworld, painting pictures of crystal spires and gardens that sang in the wind. They ate meals together in the small common area, and Nyxara slowly began to relax, her laughter coming more easily. She was brilliant, Declan discovered, with a mind that grasped complex concepts instantly, and a curiosity that seemed boundless. On the second night, they sat together watching the stars through the viewport. Nyxara had changed into one of Declan's shirts, which hung on her like a dress, and she'd braided some of her crystalline hair in a pattern she said was traditional for unmarried Lumeni women. The gesture felt significant somehow, though Declan didn't fully understand why. Tell me about Earth, Nyxara asked, tucking her small feet under her. Is it as beautiful as Luminous was? Parts of it, Declan said. I grew up near the ocean, in a place where the water met cliffs of red rock. My family had a small home there. Nothing grand, but it was filled with love. His expression grew distant. I left when I was young, wanting to see the galaxy. By the time I thought about going back, my parents had passed, and the home had been sold. I sometimes wonder if I made a mistake, choosing adventure over staying with them. Nyxara reached out and placed her small hand over his larger one. The touch sent warmth through him, and those silver markings on her skin glowed softly. They would not want you to carry regret, Declan. If they loved you, they would have wanted you to follow your heart, to find your own path among the stars. Like your mother wanted for you, Declan said gently. Yes, Nyxara's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. She told me in those final moments that I must live, must find joy again, even though it seemed impossible. I have been surviving, but I have not been living. Not until now. Their faces were close, and Declan could see his reflection in her luminous eyes. Nyxara, I need you to know something. These past few days with you They've meant more to me than years of drifting alone. I don't know what the future holds, but I want you to be part of it. If you'll have me, you would bind your fate to mine? Nyxara asked, her voice trembling. Even knowing the danger, the fact that I am the last of my kind and cannot give you what human women could? I don't care about any of that, Declan said firmly. I care about you, the person you are, not what species you belong to or what you can or cannot give me. Just you, Nyxara. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, a gesture he instinctively understood as significant. In my culture, this is how we show deep affection, how we share our essence with another. It is the first step of bonding, of choosing a partner for life. Declan closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of her skin against his, the gentle pulse of energy that seemed to flow between them. Then I'm honored, because I choose you too, Nyxara, for as long as you'll have me. They stayed like that for a long time, foreheads pressed together, breathing in sync. Two lost souls finding home in each other. Haven's Rest appeared on their sensors on the third day, a small blue and green world that orbited a calm yellow star. As they descended through the atmosphere, Declan pointed out the settlement below, a collection of buildings arranged in a spiral pattern around a central plaza. Different architectural styles blended together, reflecting the diverse species that called this place home. Captain Joseph Brandt met them at the landing pad, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile when he recognized Declan. He was an older man, his hair gone silver, but his eyes held the sharpness of someone who'd seen much and judged little. Declan Rivers, Joseph said, clasping his hand firmly. It's been too long, my friend. His gaze moved to Nyxara, and his expression softened. And who is this lovely young lady? This is Nyxara, Declan said, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. She's with me. We need sanctuary, Joseph. There are people looking for her. Joseph's expression grew serious, but he nodded. Then you've come to the right place. Haven's Rest doesn't recognize bounties or old grudges. Everyone here has left something behind, seeking a fresh start. You're both welcome for as long as you need. Over the following weeks, Declan and Nyxara settled into life on Haven's Rest. The settlement was everything Joseph had promised. A true melting pot where humans lived alongside a dozen other species in genuine harmony. Nyxara flourished in the environment, her natural brilliance finding outlets in helping others. She taught the settlement's children, human and alien alike, sharing knowledge from her lost culture. She helped repair machinery with her unique abilities, earning respect and gratitude. A young human girl named Seraphine became particularly attached to Nyxara, following her around and asking endless questions. Nyxara would laugh and patiently answer each one, and Declan saw in those moments the future she'd been denied, the life she could have had if her world hadn't burned. Declan found work with the settlement's security force, putting his skills to use protecting rather than simply surviving. In the evenings, he and Nyxara would walk through the community gardens that reminded her of home, or sit on the roof of their small dwelling and watch the sunset paint the sky in colors that didn't exist on either of their lost homeworlds. One evening, as the twin moons rose over Haven's Rest, Nyxara turned to Declan with a serious expression. I have been thinking about names, she said. Names? Declan asked, confused. You gave me back my name when you freed me from being property. But I wish to give myself a new name as well, one that reflects who I have become rather than who I was. She took his hand, her silver markings glowing softly. Among my people, when we bonded with a partner, we would create a new name together, symbolizing the joining of two lives into one path. I know humans do not have this custom, but I wish to honor both our traditions. Declan felt his heart swell. What name did you have in mind? Nyxara Starborn Rivers, she said softly. keeping the name my mother gave me, adding a name that speaks to my rebirth among the stars, and taking your family name if you will give it to me." "I will," Declan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I absolutely will." She smiled, radiant and beautiful. And this time, when they pressed their foreheads together, Declan felt something shift in the universe, as if two paths they should never have crossed had aligned perfectly. Elder Tomes, the settlement's leader and an ancient being whose species Declan had never learned, performed a bonding ceremony that blended human and what he could remember of Lumeni traditions. The entire settlement attended, bringing gifts and well wishes. Sarifying made them a crown of local flowers, which Nixara wore with pride as they stood together under the stars, hands clasped and surrounded by friends who had become family. Declan Rivers realized that sometimes the most valuable treasures weren't found in salvage or ruins. Sometimes they were found in the courage to do what was right, in the choice to see another person's worth when the galaxy said they had none. Nixara looked up at him with those luminous eyes that had once held only fury and pain, now filled with joy and hope and love. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me a name, a family, and a future when I thought I had lost everything." "Thank you," Declan replied, "for teaching me that home isn't a place. It's wherever you are." They kissed as the settlement cheered. Two survivors who had found in each other not just salvation, but the kind of love that transcends species, circumstance, and all the cruelty the galaxy could offer. Together, under alien stars on a world that welcomed the lost, they began their new life, and for the first time in years, neither of them felt alone.